This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Gary Taylor.
Hello and welcome to the latest Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us again. The recording today is from a very well-established Aston Martin specialist here in Ripley. Established for over 25 years, this company deals with all Aston Martins from post-war to Gaydon, from MOT, servicing, diagnostics, repairs, engine rebuilds and so on. In effect, if you have an Aston Martin, this specialist will be able to look after it. I am, of course, at Trinity Engineering in Ripley, and opposite me is Tim Butcher, the founder of the business. Hello Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Gary, welcome to Trinity Engineering.
What I want to do before we go into your career, what is your facility at Ripley? What are we talking about? What do you have?
Well, what we have here at Ripley is a purpose-built hospital for Aston Martins. We have approximately 15,000 feet, and it's subdivided into a larger workshop for the Heritage era cars. We have a smaller workshop for the faster turnaround Gaydon era cars. And then in between that, we have a huge parts department with over £1 million worth of stock. We have an engine build area, machine shops, fabrication rooms, and all the associated sub parts that enable us to do virtually anything to an Aston Martin.
It's quite incredible because you showed me around just before the podcast to get a feel for the press, and it's like a little TARDIS. It's all these rooms, and as you say, you do so much of the work on site. That's quite unusual, and also you have a trim shop, which I haven't really seen anywhere else, I don't think.
No, we do an awful lot on site. I'm a person that likes to be able to do just about everything because then you can create almost a one-stop shop. I think it's important for Aston Martin owners that they know that every element of their car is being undertaken by the people that they've entrusted the car to. So whether that be mechanical work or trim work or crash repairs or restoration, I think, ultimately they're your point of contact, and they want to know that they're dealing with you each and every day, each and every time they visit. I
caught a word that you said earlier on. It's a hospital for Aston Martin. That's quite sweet, quite quaint. Can you expand on that?
It is, yes. It's when we were moving here in 2017. So we actually moved in 2017, but we first found the premises in 2013, and it took quite a long time for us to get change of use. This was a warehouse beforehand, immediately before we had it, but its first incarnation was the south of England's concessionaire for David Brown tractors, which we only found out about when we were trying to get change of use.
That's an amazing link. I think there's a destiny there, Tim, isn't there?
It certainly made me very determined that we were going to be here. When you see a connection like that and you're affiliated with a brand like Aston Martin and everybody knows about the David Brown era, to find that the premises that you want to move in was an establishment that was used for the sale and service of David Brown tractors, there was a connection there that I thought, this is where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So yes, we moved in 2017, and we've been here ever since, and we've expanded as we've gone along. It's a fantastic building. It lended itself well to being converted back into a motor vehicle establishment.
Did you have any loops and hurdles to get it to a light industrial? Was it light industrial you say use?
We did need light industrial use from warehousing, and yes, there were many hoops to jump through. And I think I could bore you senseless with how much rigmarole it took to get into this building. We had to have the approval of 7 different organisations, from environmental health to noise abatement to highways agency, then the parish council, the local residents, the Guildford Borough Council, and etc. etc. And I kid you not, we had to have surveys done. And I'm quite a technical person, but some of the reports that we had done, the only bit I truly understood was my address. Some of the data on there, which to do with noise abatement and acoustics, was something I hadn't considered. But Ripley is a conservation area, so I can totally understand why the local community was quite important for them to know that we had gone through all the protocol. And we had done every piece of due diligence to make sure that we were going to comply with what the borough needed.
And I understand towards the end of the process, was it a councillor came up to you and said, Tim, what exactly are you doing? And this is where the hospital came in, isn't it?
It was, yes. When you get change of use, you have to put your case in the local county court. You have to have an appeal as to why you want to do it. I don't think people truly understood on the council, and I think there were 34 or 38 councillors. I don't think they truly understood the sort of establishment that we were trying to create, because those people that know how Aston Martins are built know that it's done in a very clean, very quiet, very calm environment. Very professional, because everything has to be done just so, but it's an environment that has to be clean, everything has to be accessible, and I was trying to relay that to the court, and the only way I could describe it to them was that it's a hospital for Aston Martin, because everybody knows what a hospital is, and people hopefully know what an Aston Martin is, so combine the two and they might understand that it's a clean, quiet, perfect environment to assemble and build Aston Martins.
Well, it seems to have done the trick, hasn't it? And it's a marvellous building. It's
Thank
huge.
you.
I think it's very impressive. I think it's amazing. How many cars can you get in here at one time?
We can work on up to 26 at any one time.
After we've done this part, Tim, we'll go around the facility and have a quick walk around and tell the listeners what's here, if that's okay.
I'll be delighted to show you.
Great. Let's go back into you a bit. Was it always cars? Were you ever going to be an accountant, a banker?
Oh, no, it was always cars. From the very beginning, it was Lego, it was Meccano.
So from a young Tim, it was Lego, cars and the rest of it?
Airfix models, you name it. It was anything that was motor-driven, whether it's bikes, aeroplanes, cars. I was just fascinated by things that moved.
Mechanical stuff. Any history of that in the family?
No, although my dad was initially was an apprentice toolmaker and worked for Rapier, which I think, if my memory serves me right, and you'll probably correct me on this, was tied into Lagonda at some point.
I think you're right. Yes,
in the early
yes.
days. So yes, he was. He did that as an apprentice, but then didn't take that avenue.
Right, and they supported you in the cars, the mechanical line of things.
Oh, immense! I mean, I had two wonderful parents that were incredibly supportive through my school days. And then my apprenticeship days, and I think when I finally set up my own business, I think Mum and Dad were beside themselves. It was just their dream come true that their son had taken it all the way through from school to mature into an engineer and a company owner.
So what happened at school? What sort of subjects did you take? What did you have to do after you left school to become a master car technician, if you like? My
school in London, I went to a comprehensive school in central London. They were probably one of the last schools that had a motor vehicle workshop on site.
Right.
There was a balance of academic work and practical work. So in your third year, what used to be third year, I don't know what they call it now, but in your third year of 5 in your comprehensive school, that year you had 3 terms and you did motor vehicle engineering for 1 term, you did carpentry for another term, and then you did metalwork and machining for the 3rd term. And then that was one of the subjects that you could choose. It was an option. On top of that, you had your, maths, English, history, geography, PE, all that kind of stuff. But you could choose one of these subjects. And me being me, I was fascinated by engineering. I took the motor vehicle engineering route. That consisted of dismantling and reassembling cars and parts of cars in the workshop. And part of your end exam was to take a assembled engine out of a car. You had to dismantle it. You then had to reassemble it, put it back in the car, and it had to run. And that was part of your end exam. And that kind of cemented my future. That's what I was going to be.
What happened after that?
Well, how I got into Aston Martin, this all stems back to my mum, who was very supportive to me and a great role model. She used to, believe it or not, she used to run a newsagent shop. And one of the customers was an Aston owner and club member and club racer. We used to pop in every day on his way home, and she would see these amazing cars outside the newsagent parked up in the street. This was in Fulham in London.
Okay.
And she would see these cars, and she got talking to him one day, said, my son is quite interested in cars. Is there anywhere that you know that he can get some practical experience, just to see if it's something that he wants to do or he wants to get out of his system, just to try. And bearing in mind I was 13 years old and still at school, that club member said, we can come and work for me evenings and weekends. I've got a small Muse garage and a collection of classic Aston Martins. So I got the chance to go and work on DB4s, DB4 GTs, V8s at the age of 13, 14, whilst I was still at school. Yeah, so yeah. I went to work Saturdays, Sundays, after school, any bank holidays I had, school term holidays, and I would do everything from changing spark plugs on a DB4 GT to scraping underseal off a DB4 race car to rectify small electrical faults on a V8. And because those were the three cars he had, what I didn't realise was that the cars were looked after by a major company in the business, who that member then introduced me to, and that was Richard Stewart Williams Limited.
Can you remember the member's name?
Yes, it was John Gote. He was club member, club racer, raced a DB4 lightweight, had a DB4 GT, and those were the cars that I started on. Cut my teeth on.
What a lovely way to start.
So he introduced me to RS Williams.
Yeah.
I interviewed there, and then Richard took me on.
What year was it? What year would this be?
This was 1983.
Okay.
So I then spent the next 15 years working for Richard in all capacities of the work that he undertook, which included everything from during my apprenticeship to the Nimrod, to the AMR1 project, to building the 4 Sanction 2 Zagatos, being project leader on building those.
The project leader on the 4 Zagatos?
Yes, which was great fun.
Quite a responsibility.
Yeah, but I'd been with Richard a long time by then, and I knew the cars very well indeed. And he entrusted that to me, and we built 4 magnificent cars.
And you were involved with Nimrod?
I was indeed, yes. And when I joined Richard in '83, so my first visit to Le Mans was '84 with the twin Bovis Nimrods. Was a huge experience. I mean, overwhelming for a 16-year-old. And I was doing small tasks, helping out with some of the engineers, fetching, carrying. I'd carry wheels, I'd clean things. As a 16-year-old, you're in awe of what's going on.
I'm in awe of you, Tim. I mean, at 16-year-olds, I think I was still doing a paper round, and there you were at Le Mans dealing with Nimrods. How did this work out?
Well, obviously, I worked for Richard at the time, and I was in my apprenticeship. And Richard ran a privateer entry for Lord Down, who was then became president of the club. He used to take a number of staff members to the event to support it. Some of my work colleagues who have since gone on to start up their own Aston Martin business, the likes of Tim Lewis, Martin Pugsley,
all right.
And so Neil Thompson and myself and a few others. We were part of the Nimrod team in '84. But yeah, as a 16-year-old, completely overwhelmed by the experience, because 1982 was the first year of the new Group C regulation. So everybody was trying out new cars. Porsche were the favourite. The Nimrod was a Lola chassis there, heavily altered with an Aston Martin engine. So it was as close as you could get to a works entry. So 84, the cars had developed. The original Nimrod, with Robin Hamilton and then Richard running one of those. I think he finished 7th that year, the first year, which is a massive achievement. And obviously then in 84 there was the twin team, 2-car team. One was run by RSW in the Brixton Arches, and the other one was run by Ray Mallock, or built and run by those. So, but it was effectively a 2-car team. So yeah, as a 16-year-old going to Le Mans for the first time, I was blown away by how enormous the event was and how amazing the people were that you were working with, and the drivers like, Mike Salmon and John Sheldon, just such lovely people and just such normal people.
You spoke enthusiastically about Mike Salmon earlier outside the podcast when we was warming up for this. Can you expand on that?
Oh, I thought the world of Michael Salmon. He always, from the very first time he met me, he always referred to me as Master Timothy. And even in my last period of working for RS Williams before I moved on to something else, I was always Master Timothy. In my 30s, I was Master Timothy. I thought the world of him, and obviously 1984 was not the most successful year for the Nimrods, with both cars crashing out. And I think it's fair to say, as a 16-year-old, in awe of the event, when the cars did crash out, it did bring a tear to my eye. I did weep. Michael just put his arms around me and said, "This is motorsport. This is what we've got to get used to."
That's very true, isn't it?
And yeah, he, very supportive, and yeah, just such a lovely man.
We talked about Nimrod, but you also mentioned the AMR racing cars, which you dealt with at RS Williams as well. Can you say
I
something
did,
about
yes.
that?
Well, that was so I was involved with the AMR one,
Yeah.
and that meant moving up to Milton Keynes. So that was a point where RS Williams effectively closed down in 1989. Richard, as team manager, took a small team from RS Williams Limited. We all willingly went up to this exciting new project and went to Ruxley in Milton Keynes. I was team electrician on the AMR 1 project, which again was a fantastic experience.
Yes.
Got to travel to many countries following the car.
Oh, lovely.
Going back to Le Mans in '89 was a wonderful experience. It didn't feel like it moved on. You know, it was the same character, same
Yes.
amazing experience. The crowds are amazing. The circuit is amazing. And we were running this brand new car at only its second race.
When was that, 89?
That was '89. So,
I think I was there. I think I was cheering on the Jaguars at the time.
oh, shame on you.
Yeah, well, sorry. I had the support for Aston Martin, but, you know, I knew where my money was going.
So yeah, being part of the two-car team
Yeah.
was, again, an amazing experience. And I was responsible for the electrics for both cars, which was, you know, repairs, servicing, manufacture of all the wiring harnesses. And I worked with Dr. Michael Otway as well, who was on the team and was heading up the telemetry side of things. So Michael would create all these wonderful boxes that would give you all the data you needed, and I was making the wiring looms that linked it all together. So fantastic experience.
AMR withdrew after that, or Aston Martin withdrew from endurance racing soon after, didn't they?
It did. I mean,
Were you still there at the time?
I was. It was supposed to be a 6-year project,
Yeah.
but sadly it was disbanded after 1 year.
Right.
I think a lot to do with Ford's ownership of Jaguar and Aston Martin.
Yeah.
But Aston Martin retired from motorsport, and that was when I followed Richard back down to what was now his Cobham premises and continued working there for a number of years.
Another Le Mans input, one of my favourite Le Mans cars was the DB7 V8, the Le Mans Racer. I find this car fascinating, and I was delighted when I was doing some research that you was involved in this. Can you give some background to this V8 DB7 Racer?
Well, yes. I mean, it used an AMR1 engine.
No.
It did. It was a AMR1 engine that was effectively a spare engine that was left over when the AMR1 project was disbanded.
Yeah.
But a working engine. It was requested by the team Synergy in France because the owner at the time, or the owner of the car, who was Michel Hommel, who is a very important and affluent French businessman, always ran an independent car at Le Mans back in the days when you could. And he had run, I think, Ferraris, he'd run a EB110 Bugatti, and this particular year he decided he wanted to run an Aston Martin. Well, the car that was available at the time was the i6 DB7. So it was decided that the six-cylinder DB7 engine was not going to last 24 hours. So someone had the brilliant idea to put the AMR1 V8 engine in there. That was acquired by Synergy from RSW. As I was the team electrician on the AMR1, I was entrusted to make the wiring loom that adapted the engine to the car. So the engine was run up on the rig in Cobham. I made the wiring looms, and then I went over with Richard to see the engine installed and connect up the final electrics and hear it breathe for the first time, which was a fantastic experience.
Yes.
To hear it start immediately after being connected up. Fantastic moment. This comes back to this car's coming to life.
Oh yeah, I mean, what would an AMR1 V8 engine DB7 be like? I mean, it sounds like
It was a monster,
a
and
monster.
It looked a fabulous car. I don't know whether anybody's ever seen it in the museum or seen it in the books, but it was a fantastic car to look at.
Is that a French museum, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. Yes. Sadly, it didn't qualify, did it?
It didn't. I mean, the driver at the time, Eric Hillary, who was a works driver at Peugeot and a Le Mans winner, was the driver who was going to drive it and was entrusted with the shakedown at the Le Mans test day. And I have to say, did an outstanding job of dialing it in, because I think even on the first run, he got nearly 20 seconds quicker by the end of the day after dialing in the suspension settings and the brake bias and just relaying to the team what he wanted.
20 seconds is a lot.
20 seconds is a lot, but just shows you how amazing Le Mans drivers are, that they can picture how they want it, and then once it all clicks and they've dialed it in, it's an absolute pleasure to drive. And he got just under 20 seconds quicker from the start of the day to the end of the first day's practice.
Because this was all done in a very short period of time, wasn't it?
It was.
A decision was made in December, was it? And qualifying started in April?
Yeah, so for Synergy to strip, build, develop and enhance the car in that period, all credit to them. They did an outstanding job. It was great fun. And I say, when we were there at test day, it got quicker by the end of the day, but it wasn't quite fast enough to pre-qualify. And I think it was third runner-up. Okay. So there were the cars that had qualified, and it was the third car that, if anything had happened to any of the other cars between the practice and the race, it would have got an automatic entry.
Well, what was the chances of that happening, Tim?
Well, everybody thought no.
No.
So sadly, the owner pulled the plug on the project, and it was parked up in his museum. And then subsequently, 3 teams had to pull out. I think one because of funding, and a couple because they had crashed the cars quite severely at preceding events. So the car would have got an automatic entry, but because no more development had been done, it was not considered to go any further. Great shame. It would that car would have run at Le Mans, but who would have known?
You eventually left RS Williams.
I did. Leaving RS Williams was a tough decision, but I think ultimately it was the right decision for me.
Yeah.
I'd reached the end of what I think I could achieve there, and whilst wanting more, there was no clear avenue that I could take that would give me either more responsibility or more to do within the company. So branching out, yes, I looked at what else I could do. Very tough decision to take, but ultimately I saw a job advertised for position within the McLaren Formula One team.
Oh, really?
And thought,
you're full of surprises, Tim.
That would be a good job to try. So I applied for the job, knowing that there would be hundreds of people that would apply for that job, because getting onto the McLaren race team is quite...
What was the job?
The job was for an electrician. Now, I had done electrics on the AMR1 project. I was involved with the AMR1 project as well. So I had specialised in the electrics of the AMR1, and I'd used that experience to then apply for the job at McLaren, which was in the electrics department, doing a similar role, but obviously time had moved on. It was much more sophisticated. Technology had developed, components had developed, telemetry had developed, and the whole concept of how you wire a car had developed from the time I'd done it previously. I applied thinking, I'll give it a chance. There's going to be dozens, hundreds of people probably apply for this job, but I'll apply anyway. Well, I got called for an interview, and they quizzed me about all my electrical knowledge, what I'd done, who I'd done it for, where I'd been, what depth of knowledge I had. And I think there was one thing that surprised them, that I knew how to lay up harnesses, which I'd learnt at Protest Technology. There is a term called contrahelically laid platforms, and that is the art of wrapping the wires in a certain direction to make them super flexible. And I think the fact that I knew how to do that put me in good stead. So I was quite surprised to be called back for a second interview, and then I was offered the job. So I joined McLaren thinking, this is a new dawn, new era.
Formula One.
Formula One.
This will do me.
Yeah, and at the time, 2 drivers were Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard.
Right.
And I say jokingly that they weren't winning until I arrived, and they stopped winning when I left. So you can read into that what you will.
Well, I think it goes without saying.
So I did almost 2 seasons there. Did the first season to see what it was like, settle in, bed it in. Was this going to be the career?
What was it like? I mean, these days, with I think it's a 23 race, 24 race calendar. I mean, it's full on. What was it like for you? There's
high pressure, high intensity. When I was there, it was only 16 races a year, but it felt like it was never ending.
Yeah.
And I think the season didn't start until really the beginning of March, and it was over by the end of September, beginning of October.
Right.
From October to January, you're building next year's car. So January is normally when there's the press release and it turns a wheel for the first time. So it's the first shakedown. It is absolutely full on throughout the winter period of Formula One season, because that's when you make the most difference. During the season, there's less development goes on because you haven't got as much time, because the same team are racing it.
Right.
So there's the background team developing, but you can appreciate when you've got no races to support, you can get much more done in the winter period. And we were full on. We were working late night, all night. I think the most I ever did in 1 week was 126 hours.
Oh, good grief.
But it was immense fun, and I was learning all the time. I was surrounded by a fantastic
Did you know
group.
it was going to be like this when you signed up?
No.
No.
I thought it was going to be busy. I didn't think it was going to be that busy. But it was good experience, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was one of those careers that you can't do for too long. I saw at the start of the second season that it was going to be very much more of the same. By this time, I realised how much I was missing Aston Martin.
Did you travel much, or were you based?
Travelled a little bit, but
Yeah.
I opted to be back at base.
Yeah.
But I did travel a little bit. It was just as busy because when you are back at base, you are helping to develop the car. There is a huge turnaround of repair parts. So the moment the car comes back from an event, it's stripped, everything is inspected, it's tested. So wishbones are tested for cracks, and tubs are checked, crash structures. The department that I was in, which was the electrics, everything is tested for continuity, resistance values, because the slightest damage to a wiring harness can affect a signal. And obviously we're talking about signals that are, millivolts, milliamps. Any interruption to that can cause a glitch on the car, which you don't want. So everything was thoroughly proof tested to make sure that it was robust enough to go into the car for a second go.
It's put you in good stead for today, because cars are very much electronically driven, aren't they? And things that go wrong on cars, it's not so much mechanically, well, more modern cars, it's not so much the mechanical failure, it's usually a glitch somewhere in the circuitry, isn't it?
Well, I think if you look back at most race histories, look at how many failures there's been at Le Mans and other long distance races. Electrics play a big part.
Yeah.
I think at one point I believed it was the biggest reason for cars failing to finish a race was electrical. Mechanical, they were very robust, but
Yes.
electrics were a bit fickle, a bit delicate in the early days.
Yes.
And it was only when they really started looking along the aerospace route where things have to go up into space, they have to survive. That was the turning point where electrics made a big difference on cars. And if you look underneath panels of a modern Formula One car or endurance car, you'll see the same sort of stuff that they used on the shuttles that went up to the moon with NASA. So it's that sort of technology that was the turning point. And a lot of the stuff that we were working with and developing at McLaren is now making its way into production cars as standard. So, for example, paddle shifts. Paddle shift from the 80s on a Formula One car was becoming quite common practice. One thing that I was involved with and knew about when I was at McLaren was an electrical handbrake. There's one particular circuit in Brazil where pit straight is downhill. So the drivers were always struggling to hold their foot on the brake and then get a good clean getaway when the lights go green. So McLaren orchestrated and developed a electric handbrake, which was button activated and would allow the driver to not have to touch the brakes. He could hold the throttle, and then the moment the lights go green, he could disengage the handbrake, which would just hold it enough to stop it rolling and get a good clean getaway. 30 years down the line, how many cars have hill hold?
Yes.
Even our transit van has hill hold. So you can take your foot off the brake at traffic lights that are uphill and it won't roll backwards. Well, I saw that 30 years ago at McLaren.
Racing does improve the breed, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, even on the Ford Transit.
Yeah.
Growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
What prompted you to move on from there? Because what happened after that? You set up on your own, didn't you?
I did.
Did you have the itch to be independent?
During the second season of McLaren, it was a great job, great people to work with. But I'd spent 15 years working on Aston Martins, and I was really starting to miss them. The people, the cars. It's something I'd trained on and knew very, very intimately and inside out. I was missing not working on them. We look after well in excess of 1,000 cars, and you get to know the owners, how they view the car, how they treat the car, how they drive it. Some drive very enthusiastically, some drive very delicately, and some cars do a lot of mileage, some cars don't. But you get to know people, and you get to know, there's families that I know the owner, I know his wife's name, the children's name, even the dog's name, because you just become part of their world. I've always found that Aston owners are immensely loyal, and we've got cars that we're looking after 25 years down the line for the same owner, or the same owner, but all the cars he's bought in the meantime. And I think the relationship that you have with the customers and the people is fantastic, and it's a major part of it for me.
So you wanted to go back into Aston Martins, and where was your first site?
We initially set up in Cobham.
Yeah.
We had a small barn on an industrial farm that housed about 8 or 9 cars, and I thought that was a good start. I then took on another mechanic, and then took on an apprentice, which is why we still take on apprentices, because I feel I was an apprentice.
Yes.
I always feel the value of it, and I'm a great one for giving something back. And there's nothing more exciting than watching an apprentice learn what you've learnt and then do it on his own for the first time. It's just such a wonderful feeling to watch. I wanted to be an engineer, and I'm now in my 41st year of being involved with Aston Martin. I can't imagine doing anything else. I'll do this till the day I can't stand up anymore, because every day I love coming into work. I bounce out of bed, can't wait to get to work.
You are a bit of a whippet around this place. I've been following you, and I think, I'm trying to keep up to this guy.
Because it's exciting, and every car's different. Every car that comes in has a different set of problems, and it keeps your brain energised trying to work out what's gone wrong. Because with a problem, there's always a cause and a result. We all know the result because something doesn't work, but the challenge is finding the cause. And once you've found the cause, you then start to think, is it a repetitive thing? Am I going to see this again? Was it a one-off? So it's always exciting.
I tell you what is exciting and enthusiastic. Again, we did some notes before we did the podcast, is that you've done quite a bit of travelling within your work as an independent Aston Martin specialist. Can I say Alaska?
Oh, Alaska was fun. In year 2000, we were entrusted with the job of preparing the DB24 Mark 1 that was involved in the Round the World in 80 Days rally, owned and driven by Barry Weir. Barry's an interesting person to work with, and I kind of liked it because he's as full on as I am. But again, an interesting
I think
challenge.
I would have liked to seen you two together.
Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, two immensely enthusiastic people working together, you get a lot done. So we were running this car, and we'd done all the preparation to get it ready for the start at Tower Bridge. The flag goes down, and then it's 80 days of rallying. It soon became apparent that there were going to be service stops. We had planned service stops, and we planned one at the halfway stage, which was Alaska, but there were 3 others that we needed to go through because of breakages. So the first stop was in a place called Thessaloniki in Greece. The rally was passing through there. Barry had managed to bend a prop shaft. There was me laughingly trying to get onto a British Airways flight as hand luggage, a prop shaft.
As hand luggage?
As hand luggage, so that I could make sure that it didn't get damaged. That caused a bit of hoo-ha at customs.
No.
And security, as me trying to put a prop shaft on the conveyor belt and go through the X-ray machine.
Which looks like a bazooka.
Which looks like a rocket launcher. So that caught, but I did finally get it on there when I said that if it had to go into the hold, I was going with it because I wasn't letting it out of my sight. So that was one experience. But one of the loveliest experiences was we had to fly out to Anchorage in Alaska for the halfway stage. So it had gone all the way through Europe, through the Middle East, through China, and then it was flown over to Alaska, where this pretty broken DB24, we had a window of opportunity to repair it and convert it for running on tarmac in Alaska. So an engineer of mine and I flew out to Alaska on the Saturday, landed in Alaska on the Saturday night. We then had 24-hour window of Sunday to work on the car before the rally left Anchorage on the Monday. So in that time, we had lots of springs to change, dampers, oil leaks, service the car, rectify the electrical problems. It had a real pasting going through China because they were on pretty rough roads.
Yeah. What period you said this? When was this? This was 90.
This was year 2000.
2000.
This was about July 2000.
Yeah, and I think the roads then were shocking, weren't they?
Yeah. So we had set the car up nice and high and soft to sort of basically wallow through the desert and get there softly. And then in Alaska, it became the second stage down through the Americas was more tarmac driven. So we were able to then convert the car to slightly different damping, different spring rates, lower the ride heights, and sort out all the broken and damaged parts. But the reason it's so memorable is that time of year, there were 80-odd cars came to Anchorage in the town, and the local residents were so excited. They'd never seen anything like this before. They were coming out to all the local garages and all the places that the cars were being worked on. And we'd hired a garage from the UK that we knew when the car came into Anchorage, we wanted a base. So we hired a workshop, and the owner was happy to let us work there overnight, and we had all the boxes of spares delivered there. So we had wheels, we had tyres, we had radiators, we had suspension components, we had brake linings, all that kind of stuff. So all that lot ready to go. Got to about midnight, and I don't know if you've ever been to Alaska, but
no.
It doesn't go dark at that time of year.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's still bright sunshine at midnight. It's the weirdest thing you've ever experienced. So and you're absolutely shattered, and you don't know why, because it's still daylight. Lots of the crowds were sort of mingling around from the town. One particular lady saw that we'd been working there for hours and we were a bit dead on our feet. She simply asked, had we had anything to eat? We said, no, haven't had any. We just haven't got time to stop. It'd be lovely to go to a local restaurant because they're all still open, but we haven't got time. And then she disappeared and came back about 2 hours later, 2 a.m, still bright, we're still working on the car. She'd cooked us something to eat and baked a cake.
Oh, wonderful.
And I thought, what an amazing act of human kindness.
Yes.
That we're in the middle of nowhere, a strange country, we're working away, and she could see that we were struggling with working through the night. We were jet lagged, we got off a plane only hours before, and she wanted to make sure that we'd got something to eat.
Oh, that's lovely.
I just thought it was a most amazing thing for someone to do.
Yeah. So did you get the car sorted in the deadline?
We got the car sorted in the deadline. It left on Monday morning, and then it carried on going. And there were a couple more stops in Toronto and Morocco where we had to change tyres and brakes and things like that. But it came home, the fourth car home, and first in the sports car class. So not a bad result for our first real attempt at rallying.
That's all right, isn't it? You made a decision to deal with a certain era of Aston Martin. What can you remind us what that era is?
We service and maintain Aston Martins from effectively the DB2 right up to the end of the VH1 platform, which will include the DB9, the Vantage, the Rapide,
right,
the DBS, the Virage, and we're now just entering the DB11 and the turbocharged Vantage era. So we do intend to start looking after those cars as they are falling out of warranty, as they are now, out their 5-year service plan. They don't necessarily want to go to a dealer. They want to come to an independent. So they're looking around for an independent that's got the experience, the tooling, etc. So we made a decision at that point that we would go deeply into it. So we would purchase the diagnostic equipment, all the service tools that we could possibly get, and then work on the technical side of things, the technical courses, the technical hub, to gather the information so that we could do these cars effectively. Because during the first 3 to 5 years, when they're under warranty, they're reasonably easy to maintain, apart from the warranty issues, but they really only have the service side of things to do. It's only when they start getting older and older, so 5 to 10 and plus years old, where you start wearing things out. So that's generally a bit that a dealership doesn't deal with, because by the time they've got to that stage, they no longer go to the dealership. We were dealing with cars that were 30, 40, 50 plus thousand miles, where things are starting to wear out, belts, and they're getting oil leaks, and they're getting wheel bearings fail and things like that, and corrosion, even on the modern cars. So we thought, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it absolutely, completely thoroughly, as we would do the heritage status cars. That means the diagnostic equipment, all the technology that goes with it, all the service tools, and train people that can work on those cars so that we can do it year on year to the same level.
You do a lot on site. Is this to give you an element of control, Tim?
I think it's important that if you are a specialist, you are able to take on everything that car needs.
Yeah.
People entrust you with the car to make sure that it is at its best all of the time. And I think if you have the enormity of those skills, no matter what goes wrong with the car, you're able to rectify that for the owner. So their point of contact is you, and whether the car needs paintwork, or whether it needs an engine rebuild, or whether it needs a clutch, or whether it needs a new windscreen, they send it to one person they have complete and total trust in.
What's your opinion on improving, or should I say enhancing Aston Martins, perhaps having power steering put on a DB2 or air conditioning in a DB6, or perhaps a performance upgrade on an engine? What's your take on this?
I think it's important to consider that we're driving in a modern environment now. So if you're driving a DB2, the roads are a lot busier than they were 80 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think there is a place for some sensible enhancements like power steering, because if you've ever driven a DB2, 2.4 or a Mark III, you realise that the steering's quite heavy. And dare I say, nobody's getting any younger. And what we're finding is that people in their maturer years are struggling with the physicality of driving the car that they have owned for 40, 50 years, and putting something like power steering on makes the car much more drivable for them, and they get their enjoyment back.
And they'll probably start to use the car more.
Yes. Same with air conditioning. I mean, DB4s, 5.6s, they never had air conditioning as standard. They are quite hot and clammy inside when you are, you're on a hot day. And these cars tend to get used on days like today. I mean, you've come to us, it's the hottest day of the year.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So it's the sort of day that a car like a DB4, 5.6 would get used on. There are people that are purists that say, well, you open the window, and I totally get that. If you are someone that wants to have air conditioning because it makes it that much more comfortable to drive, then I think that's an acceptable thing to do. The important thing to me is making it very discreet. So things that are hidden, so they don't detract from the original beauty of the car. So you haven't got lots of electronics on show, and you haven't got massive power steering systems that are on show. I think that's important. Same with engine enhancements. I agree with certain enhancements, like taking a DB 4, 5 or 6 up to 4.2 litres, because that's considered the norm. And I don't know if anybody knows where that comes from, but it used to be the maximum capacity that you could run that 6-cylinder engine in at Le Mans in 4.2 litre. So that's why project cars will run at 4.2, or later project cars run at 4.2. So it's a known combination that you can run an Aston engine to, and I'm fine with that. Where I fall off the radar on this is I don't believe in unnecessary modifications or upgrades or alterations just because we can.
Right.
I'm very much along the lines of keeping the car as it should be. I'm very focused on the heritage of the car, using the correct parts, keeping a DB4 or 5 or V8 how it was when it was born, because it was a sensational car then, and it still is now. I am a great heritage fan.
Yes.
I have spent a lifetime with Astons and respect the way that they're built, the love that they were put together with. And I think if you do too much to enhance a car, you take away its soul.
Right.
And, you want to keep it the way it was, as near as you can. There is nothing wrong with a few modern enhancements that make driving on our current roads, which are so much busier than they ever were. If you can make a car safer by some slightly better brakes, or some more precise steering, or better tyre technology, or different wheel alignment, those are very valid things to do. But unnecessary modifications that take the car away from the original shape or its original specification or its original condition, I don't know that they're necessary.
With your own cars, Tim, I saw one in the workshop there, your own rather beautiful V8 Vantage,
Yes.
Newport Pagnell version. It's a lovely green. Any modifications on that?
It is to true Vantage specification.
True Vantage specification. I mentioned the colour. What is the colour of it?
The colour is orchard green. One visitor to an Aston Martin heritage show called it metallic grass.
I think that's probably fair.
I did. It did make me chuckle.
I said that with caution. Yeah, and metallic grass looks good. How long you had that car?
I've had it for now nearly 15 years.
Oh, right.
When I was an apprentice RSW, it was my favourite car. My favourite car, my favourite colour. I like pastel colours. The green, it's quite an exciting colour because I latterly found out that when it was ordered from new, that was a special colour, almost like a Q colour would be now. It was in their modern range, but you had to pay extra for it because it had a gold particle in it rather than the silver.
Yes.
So when the sunshine hits it, it goes bright yellow, and it has a flip from green to yellow. It's a very interesting and exciting colour.
It's a beautiful colour. You also have an AMR Roadster.
I do, yes. I have one of the last AMR Roadsters in Halo combination.
Okay, right. And the other one recently found out about, and thank you for this, is that, as you know, the Aston Martin Heritage Trust are holding a festival this year in August, 30 years of the DB7. And for the DB7 photo shoot, you brought up your DB7 GT prototype. Is that right?
That's right, yes. I own the DB7 GT prototype, which was one of the first batch of cars built in V12 form, and was used to develop the GT program enhancements. And love it. I've just come back from Le Mans in it.
Yes.
It's a wonderful thing to drive. I'm a big DB7 fan. Once they're sorted out, they're a really great car to drive.
They're a lovely cruiser, aren't they? They are a lovely cruiser. I do love the cars. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is any other cars in the Tim collection that you...
I have a DBS V12 as well, which I bought... It was the car I never thought I'd own, but the car I'd always want to own, because I think it's one of the greatest Astons they've ever made.
Right.
DBS V12 in manual is just such a great combination. An amount of electronics to make it a bit safer and a bit more fun, but not too much that you lose control. It is a real brute of a thing.
Right, of these four cars, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're not going to dodge it. Which is your favourite child?
If I could only ever have one car, I'd have the DBS V12.
Can I just ask, why Trinity? Why Trinity Engineering?
When you have a company full of very skilled and very talented people that do some extraordinary work on some amazing cars, I didn't want to have a company name that was just me. I wanted to respect everybody's effort within the building, and for them to know that it's not just about one person. So the reason I chose Trinity normally means three. I thought long and hard about this and thought Trinity works because we maintain and service cars past, present and future.
Right.
So the past, the current cars, and ultimately the cars that will come out of warranty in the future.
Yes.
So those three angles, three elements are what Trinity stands for.
Right, Tim, what we do, let's go and have a look around Trinity and see... the past, present, and what future cars you're dealing with at the moment, if that makes sense.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Well, this looks like it's part of the main workshop.
So this is the Heritage Workshop. So this would be cars that range from the DB2 right up to effectively supercharged Vantage.
Right.
It's a real mixture of cars. So they're all in for different things. So in this part of the building, it doesn't matter whether it's coming for a service, a clutch, an engine rebuild, a crash repair or restoration. The heritage era of cars are done in this building.
It looks like each car has its own bay and tools next to it.
Yeah, we've got the workshop set up as 8 different workstations, 8 ramps, 8 benches, 8 spaces for toolboxes, and within that area there's air, fuel, vices, dustbin, you name it. So the guys have their own workstation and everything they need to work on that car.
So I'm just going to look over here. Now, it looks like we've got a DB6. Looks like it's just come back from the paint shop. But I was going to say paint. It's not a paint. It looks very thick. What is it?
Well, this is a car that's come in for chassis and body repairs. So it's a DB6 that's been used lovingly through the family for the last 20 odd years. And it got to the stage where it needed a repaint and all the chassis corrosion rectified. So anybody that knows Aston Martins will know that the 4s, 5 and 6s do have an element of corrosion that needs to be rectified. So this had all the corrosion rectified, all of the new body panels put on, so it's had new door skins, it's had part of a front because it was so heavily damaged that it needed a new section. And now the car has been shaped and profiled, and it's in a stage that's called EP. So EP meaning epoxy primer. So what this does is this is a thick coat of paint that replicates the finished depth of the final material. So this stage of EP means that we can reassemble the car, and we will now drill all the new holes for bumpers and badges, and there's Superleggera badges, windscreen washers, wipers, door handles, things like that are not there from new. So all of those holes have to be put in, and it's much easier to do it in EP because if you slip with a drill or a screwdriver, doesn't matter.
Yes, on a nasty finished paint job, you wouldn't want to do it.
Not that you want to, but, things do happen, however careful you are. So when you're in this stage of EP, you build the whole car to make sure that all the modifications that you've had to do, that whether you've had to change the scuttle panel, so you want to make sure that the windscreen fits, or you put a new door skin on, so you want to make sure the window frame fits. We build the car to complete build as it is in epoxy primer. If there are any alterations to mark, then we mark it with a pen. Once that's done, we then strip it down, make the alteration, and then it will go through to the full paint process. So we're building the car then in a fully painted state, knowing that everything fits, all the holes are in the right place, and there's no issues with alignment.
Above it is a DB4, what series is this, Tim?
This is a Series 3, one of my favourite series of DB4.
It is lovely, and obviously we can't take photographs of it because it is a customer car, but this has been in for a full restoration, and just like, it's a beautiful car as it is from looking from the top down on it, but I'm looking underneath up to the underneath of the car, if that makes sense, and it's just a work of art under here, isn't it?
Well, they are a work of art, and what we're fortunate is that since these cars were first made, every process that is now available has improved. So, chroming's improved, zinc plating's improved, powder coating's improved. So, without doubt, you can make them better than they were, but that's primarily because all these finishes and textures have improved exponentially over the years. One of our company slogans, if you like, is restoring the past with engineering of the future. Yeah. So I think that rings true in that we can use some modern techniques, modern materials to make things A, last longer, but B, ultimately produce a much better product than they were back then when technology wasn't as good as it is now.
And over in the corner here, Tim, well, we don't have an Aston Martin, but we have an Aston Martin link, if you like, being a Lagonda. This is beautiful, isn't it?
Well, this is a lovely car. This is a 2-litre tall chassis Lagonda from 1928. It's owned by one of our customers who we maintain his modern Aston Martin, and he asked if we would entertain the 1920s Lagonda that was a family heirloom that he now owns and needed recommissioning to get it back onto the road. And me being me, I do like a project, and I do quite like to do things that are different and exciting because it's a bit of variety in the workshop. So absolutely jumped at the bit to try and get this back on the road. So we've been going through it. There are a number of things that are worn out. There are a number of things that are broken or corroded away. But yeah, it dates back to the 1928. And what I'm staggered by is how well it was built back then. There's some engineering and some technology on here that is still available now. With the braking system, the engine is very strong, very robust. The chassis is immensely strong. It is a great car to drive, and I couldn't resist the challenge of getting it back on the road.
Okay, shall we go into your next workshop?
Yep.
Tim, I think this is called your modern workshop.
This is the modern era workshop.
Yep.
So this has 2 ramps and a team that are servicing and maintaining the modern era. So from DB7 onwards, we would do all sorts of things in here, from routine servicing to the dismantling for crash repairs and the reassembly, clutches, engine problems, diagnostics, electronics. Obviously, we're not at the stage now where people are restoring these cars, but there are times when they're requiring extensive amounts of work to bring them back up to scratch because they've either been damaged in some way, shape or form, or, dare I say, sadly neglected along the way.
Okay, so what we got here, Tim?
Here we have our own engine rig. There's a few companies in our industry that have dyno testers. We didn't really have the space nor the necessity for that. But what we did find was that during the COVID period, lots of people restoring their Aston Martins. Now, that's quite good and quite beneficial, but it left us with a problem because normally when we restore a car, we get the whole car. What we were getting through COVID period was a lot more engines. Traditionally, we would have had the car as well, so you would build the engine, set it up, put it back in the chassis, and then you'd run it and do all your road testing process, so you'd send it out as a fully built and running engine. during the COVID period, we didn't have that because people were sending components over from Austria, from the Czech Republic, from the Far East, places like that. So we needed something to run the engines on. And so, as I previously mentioned, we didn't have the room within the building to have a dedicated dyno cell. So we drew up and we built ourselves an engine running rig. Simulates
as you do
the chassis. And the ironic bit is we just went through the stores and worked out what we needed. So you'll see here we have a V8 dashboard with all the switchgear on it and instrumentation. We have a DB7 radiator. We have a DB9 fan pack, a DB5 fuel pump, DB4 fuse box and starter solenoid and coil. So this is basically, we've robbed our stores of bits and we've built an engine frame that will take any configuration of engine from the DB24 right up to the V12.
Good grief. That's flexible, isn't it?
That's flexible. So we have a basic rig and then we have a different set of jigs for each engine. So we have a flight case that has that engine's components. So it'd be all the mountings, all the exhaust, the alternator, the fuel pump, the wiring, the throttle linkage. And then when we've finished on that engine and we mount another engine, we go and get the other flight case. It's been absolutely invaluable because we can run the engine up, run it up to temperature, put it through some heat cycles, set all the oil pressure, the ignition timing, the throttle linkages, and then you can run it up for a few hours, video everything so the owner knows that it's all running beautifully and it's all nice and smooth, and then you can literally drain down the fluids, put it in a packing case and send it back to where it came from. They can install it into the engine, connect it all up, and it's on the button.
And over here, well, I think clearly this is your trim shop, trim area.
Yeah, this is our trim area. We do, obviously as part of the restoration, we do a lot of trimming. I would have said that maybe 1 in every 3 cars that we have through the workshop needs some form of trimming. From needing a set of carpets because they've gone threadbare or they've just disintegrated with age. It could be a headlining that's sagged down. It could be a roof that's been torn or split with age. Or it could be a seat that's collapsed and wants repadding. Right the way through to dashboard retrimming and a new outer hood. Most of our leather comes from Connolly. If you're restoring DB4s, 5, 6s, I try to impress upon the owner at all times that if you want to keep it original, then going with the original Vomol leather is an important decision. And we have trimmed cars for owners in their own choice before. Normally it might be a Bridge of Weir alternative, which was used in the later cars, but certainly with the older Astons, I try to stick with Vomol because it's such beautiful material to work with, and it's traditional. The grain is right. It's very unique. If you've seen Vomol, it's an unusual and interesting grain that there's nothing like it. So when you're trying to restore a car to exacting standards, you really must use the correct leather because that's what it had when it was new.
Okay, so we're up at the top of Trinity Engineering, above the workshops, and well, this looks like a parts department, doesn't it? And a very comprehensive one as well.
Well, it is a very comprehensive one. The thing you learn very early on with servicing and maintaining these cars is you need a big parts stock. There are times when parts aren't as readily available as you would like them to be. We keep as much stock as we can because I want to make sure that work is uninterrupted.
I think knowing you as I do, I'm not entirely surprised. Everything, I'm on about everything, is labelled. We've got here DB56S VH clutch master, loader numbers 0.7 Girling cylinder, and then underneath we've got a DB2/4 Bush clutch operating lever. Your label printer must go into overdrive.
We've certainly been through a few rules of cable, but I do love order. I'm a very methodical person. I love to be able to find something really quickly.
I tell you what I'm finding, Tim, that we are running out of time, so I'd like to wrap up the podcast here and just say thank you very much for telling the Tim Butcher and Trinity Engineering story, and, well, thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.